Hello, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the whole MCTAC team, I would like to welcome and thank you for tuning in today to Module 4, which is part of our Data Beyond the Tip of the Iceberg series. And the name of today's module is Are You a Data Wizard? My name is Ashley Fuss, and I am the Director of Evaluation at the McSilver Institute. And I'm joined by my colleague, who is the MCTAC consultant, Chris Copeland, who is going to take us through today's presentation.
Thank you, Ashley. And welcome to this module. What I hope to do today is take you through, have a good understanding of how this gap assessment tool works. We're going to show you a recommended process, give you some idea about how the tool is designed, and show you how it works in detail and the scoring and results. And I'll actually show you the tool in real life as well. So, to give you an overview, it's anybody that's familiar with doing a self-assessment, this will be, I think, fairly straightforward for you. There are 60 questions, and as Ashley mentioned in Module 3, they're really grouped into questions that the answers are either no, impartial, or in progress, or yes. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go through. We really recommend you use a team approach for completing this tool. And that's because the tool is really a mirror of the matrix. It's designed to give you an idea about how effectively you're using data across the domains and throughout the agency. It's both a horizontal and vertical look at the agency across finance, HR, compliance, outcomes and population, but also through the various job titles, from staff through supervisors, management, and leadership. So what we're recommending is the team that completes this tool should also recommend that cross-section of the agency. So in terms of doing this process, I really recommend that the process is formalized. This is a big undertaking to really carefully review the use of data and how successful you are with that within the agency. So we would recommend that there's a very clear executive sponsor that really underscores the commitment of the agency to doing a careful assessment, an honest and open, forthright look at the agency. That there's somebody put in place that has the authority to lead the project. So we're going to be calling on people from across the agency to complete this tool. So we do need somebody who has been given that designated authority to do that. We suggest that you ask for people to invitations from people rather than choosing people from the agency. Make sure that you're announcing this to the staff and the board that this is a process that the agency is going through, and invite applications from people to become team members of the assessment tool rather than handpicking people. It may be that you get a more honest and open view of the agency that way. And then make sure you have a formal reporting mechanism as well, so that the results of this tool are not just something that's kept on the shelf, that you've already set up a way of making sure that you give feedback to those who took part, but also the board and the agency in general. And we'll be talking more in later modules about how to effectively change the processes within the agency, depending on the results of this tool. So, in terms of the assessment and having a group of people doing the assessment, I think it's important that there's consensus agreed upon. Not that we've got 6 people and 4 people say one thing and that's the majority rules. I think there's an important part of this, because it's such an honest approach to looking at the agency, that consensus is what you're trying to achieve, that everybody generally agrees with how you're answering the questions. That could either be done as a group, where the discussion takes place as a group to decide on the answer, or it could be that individuals complete this and themselves and then come together as a group and try and achieve consensus. And it may be that the end report could have a minority report. There's no harm in the consensus saying this is how we view the agency, but there's a group of people, there's somebody on the assessment group that says, no, I don't agree. I think we're missing these areas. But make sure you have a way of publishing the results, and then from there creating a plan of action. And again, in later modules, we'll be talking a little bit more about that. We are going to provide a few ways of completing the tool. One is a downloadable Excel spreadsheet that automatically scores and automatically creates a work plan. And there's a PDF version that allows you to print and score offline. And a third version could be that you create a Google sheet of the Excel spreadsheet, and then people can work on it together. I'll show you all those versions as we go through this module. The gap assessment looks at the five domains: overall agency, and then the five areas across that we talked about within the matrix. Finance, it's related to the financial information that measures the performance of the agency and programs and the productivity of staff. We're going to be looking at the human resources staffing. It's related to data understanding, the recruitment and quality of the agency staff. Compliance, this is regarding measuring the agency's performance against administrative functions, against regulatory standards across the agency. Looking at the people that you are providing services for, not necessarily looking at the individual clients, but the overall population, and looking at the use of outcomes within the agency. So those are the domains that we're going to be looking at. And this is what the gap analysis, the gap tool actually looks like. Each section has a series of questions with no input, progress, partial, or yes. The only question that's different from that is this first overall question. Is leadership committed to using data to derive decisions? And really, this is a test of agreement amongst the people, staff completing this tool as to how committed is this agency to using data to drive decisions. Really, none of the rest of this implementation of use of data can be effective without a strong leadership commitment. So that's why that question sits on its own. The scoring, you'd use no if there's clearly no evidence whatsoever that the statement's true. In progress or partial, there's evidence that some effort's been made in this area, either in development, or the statement is true in some areas of the agency, but not all. Or yes, if there's clear evidence that the statement's true consistently across the agency. And simply complete the assessment tool by looking at the question: does the agency have a strategic plan with clear goals and support? If it's no, place a 0 in there. The box will automatically turn red. Place a 1 if you think a question is answered by it being in progress or partially across the agency, or 2 if it's yes. So each of these domains has a series of 11 questions to be answered in the same way. And it'll give an overall scoring for each of these domains. So instead of just giving a crude overall agency score, you'll be able to look at each of those domains and see where you're doing in terms of the use of data within each of them. And just to give you an idea, we've come up with a sense of an overall score for the agency in terms of whether you have met most of the critical data elements, whether there's some significant gaps, or whether really you're at the starting point in terms of using data for managing the agency in a data-driven way. So the next domain is finance. And the important things about these questions are that they try to not only get at whether the data is available, but is it available in a meaningful way to staff, and is it actually being used? So if you look at the first few questions, are profit and loss statements prepared monthly? The answer to that may be yes. And they may be published on a certain date each month, so we can regularly understand that on the 20th of each month the profit and loss statements are being produced. But are they available to the managers? Have the managers been trained to understand how to use the profit and loss statements? Do all the programs have clearly defined financial performance standards? So the questions generally in each of these domains start at a higher level, and then as the questions get answered, they tend to work their way to the point of saying, so we've got the data, is it in the hands of the people who need it? Have they been trained, and do we know how to effectively use the data? So finance, human resources looks at, are we looking at salaries benchmarked and adjusted against market? Do you know how long it takes to fill vacancies? Do the managers know how long it takes to fill vacancies? Do we have staff satisfaction surveys? If we do, is the result communicated with staff? Are we providing exit interviews for staff? Is that information being not just looked at centrally, but is it being given to the program managers, the staff who are responsible for the actual culture and performance of the agency? Do they get that information in a way that's actionable? Quality compliance starts with the question that, has the agency actually conducted a risk assessment to identify high risk against the regulations? This may have taken place, but are you auditing against those high risk programs? Have you got dedicated staff in a compliance role to actually review those? And if you don't have dedicated staff, do you have somebody who's assigned to do that on a day-to-day basis? Are we providing feedback to the staff regarding compliance? Do the staff know how to develop action plans based on that data they're receiving? Have you developed quality standards? Do you have staff dedicated to reviewing quality? Looking at the population served, we're also looking here at, do you not only collect basic demographics, is that demographics being shared with the managers? Do you look at that demographic against other data to try and figure out trends and patterns? Do you do client satisfaction surveys? Are the results shared with staff? So not only are we looking at whether we're collecting data, are we about the people we're serving? Are we actually using? Are we actually providing that data in a meaningful way to the people, to the staff who can use it to improve quality of service? And finally, the last domain looks at outcomes. This is perhaps the most difficult area that we will be looking at in terms of, do we have outcomes that prove that we are effective in our mission? And this again would need decisions by agency leadership to make sure that we understand as an agency what are the outcomes that we're aiming for, and then are we measuring them? Do we have a way of collecting data? Is that outcome data being shared with programs so they're able to improve their processes based on the outcome data? So by scoring this, each of those domains, you will begin to see a score for those areas that you scored either in progress or yes, and a number for the gaps that within each of those domains. And we'll show you a automatically generated demonstration of that in terms of the score, the positive scores, and where the gaps are in each of the domains. Also, each of the domains will generate, each of the questions within the domains will generate a statement that is designed to suggest what you should do. So if you remember from the finance domain, the question was, are the profit and loss statements prepared and available regularly each month? If the answer is no, then the recommendation for the work plan is ensure that takes place. If they are, but they're not, if they're published in various dates each month, then the recommendation is you set a date by which the profit and loss statements are published. If you're not training managers, the suggestion in the work plan is make sure managers have a monthly set of financials and they're trained to be able to read them. So what you will see for each of those domains is a limited set of recommendations based on all of the answers that are no within any of the domains. So let me show you, if I can, what that looks like in practice. I'm going to quickly bring up the assessment tool here. So when you look at the assessment tool in an Excel version, you'll see 3 tabs: the instructions, which generally go through what I've just talked about in this module; the input section, which is a place where you would make your input; and a report section. So the input section, let me just go through this and say, suggested that we have profit and loss statements that are prepared each month. They're sometimes produced on a certain date each month, but they're not available for managers. So by doing this, you get a visual of whether you have a clear visual, and also you begin to create a score for this domain. And if we go to the report section, what this does is automatically report that you've scored for the positives and you've got a gap of 19. And what this automatically does is, for those where you scored 0, give you a list of recommendations in terms of a work plan. So I can show you if we scored like this, but this here, I'm just going to quickly go through this. We automatically on here have a score and a list of recommendations for a work plan for the financial module. And each of these modules work in exactly the same way. The PDF version, it looks just like the Excel spreadsheet and is available for you to print and use as a scoring tool. So returning back, so the tool is available. What we would recommend you do is look at the tool, create the team, look through the gap analysis, and look at what the recommendations are. The next module will be looking in more detail at the questions asked and the matrix at the agency leadership level, and looking in more detail about the data that you have available, the data that you should be using, and ask some questions about what each individual agency can be creating in terms of their own unique outcomes and risk assessment. And remember, as much as we fear and worry about data, it really is your friend. And in this day and age, trying to manage an agency without that data is something that should be avoided. So there's further learning. We have other learning opportunities within the MCTAC resources, the performance-driven cultural readiness form, the Medicaid managed care tool, readiness assessment tool, add extra layers to the work that you would do with this gap assessment tool. And if you have further questions, please send them to MCTAC at the email that you see there, mcac.info@nyu.edu. We will be doing a webinar to follow up on these 4 sessions. So we will be available for more questions and discussions about the use of the gap tool and the matrix itself. So thank you for taking part today. I hope you find the assessment tool to be useful, and please join us at the next session. And also any questions that you have, we would love to hear them, and we'll answer them as soon as we can within 1 business day or less. So thank you and take care.